everyone, welcome back to the Space Koala channel. My name is Luca, and today I will be sharing with you something that you will hopefully find very useful, especially if, like many others and similar to myself, you don't have the luxury of living under beautiful dark skies. And if you follow me over social media, you have probably seen that I unfortunately live in a very light-polluted area. And therefore, oftentimes I end up traveling to the mountains to go under dark skies for my imaging sessions. For me, traveling to my favorite dark skies is about an hour and a half of a drive, so it is doable. But over the years, I have learned quite a few tricks to make this whole process as painless and easy and seamless and efficient as humanly possible. That is especially because oftentimes I end up having to go out during the week to shoot, and then I have to come back and go to work the next day, so I have to be very efficient with that. Traveling with all this equipment definitely comes with its own set of challenges. If you don't go out there with a very good plan, you might find yourself spending more time setting up your equipment than actually imaging. Forgetting something at home, gear that is really difficult to transport, having to deal with weather conditions such as wind can really put a damper on an otherwise beautiful night. This is why over time I've developed a few time-saving methods and tips to help resolve some of these really common issues. I've collected all the things that I've learned over the years into a short list for you guys. Some of them you could apply immediately, while others, of course, will need an initial investment. For me, a good investment is anything that will enable me to use my telescopes more under the skies. So this video is mostly focused on time-saving tips that help you maximize the amount of time spent actually shooting under dark skies. Let's get right into it. Tip number 1, transport as much of your gear already assembled as you possibly can. This might sound simple and obvious, but actually it ends up saving you the most time. For example, my Rasa telescope here is already assembled and pretty much ready to go. I don't have to spend any time when I get there. I just put it on the mount and I'm ready to shoot. When I set it up and I want to start shooting, all I have to do is connect a power cable to the ASI air here, connect 2 cables, a power and a data cable to the mount. This takes me approximately 2 minutes overall. Then I polar line in another 3 minutes, and that is a total of 5 minutes and I'm ready to shoot. Since with the large telescopes, it takes longer to set it up. Oftentimes I use a dedicated computer, not just an ASI air. It needs a lot of cables. It takes me a longer time to set up. So even if I get out there when it's already dark, I take 5 minutes to set up the quick and simple scope and I can already start shooting, while I may spend half an hour setting up the proper rig. With the investment of these extra 5 minutes or extra 10 minutes in the case of 2 scopes, I end up having 2 or 3 times as much data with just a tiny bit of extra time spent. Of course, this was under the assumption that you are shooting with multiple telescopes, but even if you're not, it just makes your life infinitely easier if you want to go out quickly and start shooting, that everything is already assembled and you just put your tube on the mount and in 5 minutes you're ready to go. This makes it much more likely that you will go out to shoot even if you only have a few hours of clear sky versus having to deal with all the cables individually. And that brings us to tip number 2, bubble wrap. When you have to transport your gear via plane, boat, public transit, anything like that, you have to make sure that you have something that is flexible, easy to customize, but that will protect your equipment very well. Forget the pre-cut little sponge cubes that they sell at the store. Just use bubble wrap instead. I used to use these industrial tool bags with pre-cut foam inserts, which seemed like a great idea at the time. But the problem is I changed my setup quite a lot. Maybe I sold a camera or upgraded to a new optic or made some adjustments every time I had to buy and rebuy or remake these foam inserts. This is costly, time-consuming, and definitely not environmentally sustainable. Now I just use a roll of bubble wrap. I bought this a while ago. It will be enough for the rest of my life. It works perfectly to protect any year, and the same piece can be reused over and over again, and you will never have to throw it. If I want to bring around a small refractor like this one, and I don't have space in the back of the car because I have some larger equipment there, I can just wrap this up in bubble wrap, put it in the footwell, and nothing will happen to it. It will be perfectly protected at all times. I also make these little pouches out of a piece of bubble wrap and a piece of tape. It takes about 1 minute to make one of these, and then I can put my little tools into it to ensure that the tools and my equipment, they don't damage one another. My next tip: invest in harmonic mounts. Now, these have gained a lot of popularity over the last few years, especially after ZWO came out with their AM5 mounts. But few people know that they have been around for quite a bit longer than that. I actually got into harmonic mounts a few years ago when there were just a few options available on the market. My very first harmonic mount was this one, the Rainbow Astro RSD 135. It is tiny and compact. It weighs just about 4 kilos, but despite that, it can carry up to 18 kilograms. After all that great experience with the RSD 135, when it was time for me to pick a larger mount, it was obvious that I was going to go for his big brother, the Rainbow Astro RSD 300. Now, this one weighs about 9 kilos, but it can carry up to an impressive 50 kilos, out of which 30 can be without a counterweight. Now, I think that's safe to say that I will never be needing a telescope that is heavier than 50 kilos that I would be carrying around with me. So it is very likely that this one will be my forever mount. Now, luckily, over the past 2 years, there has been a boom of these strainwave gear mounts on the market. So in addition to these OG Korean designs, ZWO's AM5 and AM3 has become incredibly popular. Pegasus Astro and Skywatcher have also come out with their versions, and even Ioptron has a hybrid mount where one axis is harmonic, the other is not. If you want the convenience of a small but powerful mount you don't even need to balance, you can even find some lesser known Chinese brands who are making these mounts built with the exact same motors, but instead of building up their own firmware, they just work via the open source on-step system. The reason these harmonic mounts are such a game changer, especially if you travel with your gear, is that they don't require counterweights for the most part, for most loads. That saves you time and space and weight that you don't have to carry around. They are very compact, both in terms of weight, size, and shape, so they are very, very easy to pack, even for flying. And if you choose a model that has a harmonic motor on the declination axis as well, you pretty much don't have to balance your telescope ever. So if you're someone that has to travel with your equipment a lot, I highly recommend going this route. Now, what is a good stable mount worth if you're gonna have to put it on a tripod that weighs 3 times as much, or even worse, something that is wobbly and will just end up ruining your shots? I recommend investing in some high quality carbon tripods. Now, these aren't just your regular carbon tripods, they're carbon tripods on steroids. They're very stable. I will trust these with pretty much any weight. This one is rated for 180 kilos, I think. This one a bit less, it's a tiny bit smaller. They're made by a Korean company called Supermount, and they are really very far away from the little ones that you get included with some of those harmonic mounts. On this one, I even added the extra feet that provide a little more stability, so I will really trust it with any of my gear any day. Now, even though they're made to carry these huge weights, they're still remarkably light. They weigh next to nothing. I can easily lift them up like this. I can bring them around with me on an airplane, and they still fold up to be a decent size. Of course, with smaller loads, those little tripods that are included with the AM5 or any of those mounts are perfectly fine. But with the amount of people that I see online showing that they have to buy kettlebells to put into the little basket thingy to make it more stable, lets me know that they cannot be trusted for larger loads. Like I said, these are by the company Supermount, but I'm quite sure that there are numerous alternatives on the market which are higher end, really good quality carbon tripods. So there are options if you are looking for a lightweight tripod that you can still trust with your large equipment. Of course, a steady tripod will help you very little if the terrain is uneven or soft, like if it's on grass or mud or gravel or anything like that. That brings us to my next tip, which is always carry around these little rubber or plastic discs. I put these under the tripod legs on uneven terrain. And it will ensure that my equipment, no matter how heavy, will never sink into the ground. These are sold as bases for a motorbike stand or motorbike lift, but they work perfectly for our purposes for a tripod base for astrophotography, especially if your tripod doesn't have the feet I was showing before. They cost practically next to nothing. They weigh nothing. They take up no space. So I always have like 6 of them in my car, so I can put them under at least 2 of my tripods. Now, what is more annoying than when you go out to a dark sky, still during the day, you set up all your equipment, probably much heavier than this, you do your best to polar align it, and when the darkness comes and the night comes, you see that you are super far off from actual polar alignment, more than what your mount can handle with the screws. So what do? You have to disassemble the entire thing, move the tripod, or you have to do the very risky thing of moving the entire rig at once. This is why my favorite feature of my tripod is this system called RDL that I think stands for rotatable double locking, and it just makes it very easy for you to do even large adjustments safely without unmounting anything. Now, the way it works is you can actually loosen all of these screws, holding it halfway. You can be sure that it can never fall off. Like, this will never fall out of it, because the way it works is you can only remove the mount if you lift it straight up. So that means no matter how big of a telescope or setup you already have on it, you can easily rotate around as much as you want for your polar alignment. Like I said, this one is called the RDL, and this is made by the same company as the one that makes my tripod, but it is also available separately. In fact, I special ordered some of the bottom female parts to mount on my piers that I have at home. So if I want to decide that one day I will be shooting from home, all I have to take up from my car is the mount itself. I put it on the pier and I'm ready to go. I'm pretty sure that also for this there are other companies and other systems that provide the same solution. This is just the one that I use because this is the one that came with my tripod originally. The next tip to keep in mind is always have a set of basic tools that you keep in your car so that you are prepared for everything that you cannot possibly be prepared for. I highly recommend keeping some of these tools in your car in a bag at all times, because you never know when you're going to need them. The first thing, I think everybody absolutely needs a full set, a series of Allen keys, because most things that we fix on the telescopes are fixed with these. So just keep a whole set of Allen keys, or if you need anything else like screwdrivers, keep a set of those with you, because you never know when you're going to need it. I recently had to switch to dovetail clamps between 2 of my telescopes because one dovetail was not entering one of the clamps. Now, since I had these in my car, this whole thing took me approximately 1.5 minutes. It was really easy to do and I lost no time. Now, had I not had one of these, I would have not been able to use one of those scopes that night. Another, maybe quite unexpected tool that I recommend is a good pair of rubber gloves. I used to have just your regular pair of drugstore vinyl rubber gloves, but I recently came across this pair of, I think they're like fishing gloves. They're super durable, they're extra sticky, grippy, and these can also save your life if you have an adapter that is stuck on something, if you need to unscrew something that you're not able to do because it's slippery. This has also saved my life many times. Finally, I also have one of these clamps in my car in the aforementioned bubble wrap pouch. This is adjustable in size, so I can grab whatever I want with it for the most part. Now, of course, this is metallic, and I would never even think about putting this directly on my equipment, but I can put this inside my rubber glove, and I have a clamp that is very strong, sturdy, yet gentle enough to put on any of my equipment. Now, all of these tools together take up virtually no space in my car. It's kind of the set and forget mindset. You put them in, you have them with you every day, and 19 times out of 20 you won't need them, but when you do, you have them. The next tip is really just one more thing to keep in your car, and that is a white piece of cloth or t-shirt or anything like that. What is worse than having the perfect night of cloudless skies, you're imaging all night, and then somehow your flat box stops working and you can't take any flats? It is very old school, and many of us don't even think about it because we all have flat boxes. But the traditional way to take flat fields is by putting on a white piece of cloth on your telescope and just pointing it at the sky during dawn. I have this pillowcase with me at all times. Of course I do, because actually this is the one that I sleep on, so this is zero extra things to take with me. But if for whatever reason I have issues with my flat panel, I always have this as a backup. I throw it on top of the telescope and I take my flats the old-fashioned way, and it just works reliably. Once again, something that takes zero effort, but is just an extra safety precaution to have with you. When there's no light pollution, no rain, no clouds, nothing, no moon, you can still have a fair bit of wind ruin the entire experience. There's a couple things you can do. As long as the conditions are not extreme, you can still make it work. Here's what I do. First thing you want to do is have your tripod as low as possible, as long as it's still stable, because the closer to the ground it is, the less torque the wind can have over it, and the more stable it will become. The next thing is, once again, harmonic mounts. These are known to be much more stable, both for being physically compact and also because of how they are geared on the inside. They are a bit more resistant than traditional mount to the wind. Finally, remove any parts from your setup that can act as a sail. Number one, if you can live without a dew shield, that makes the surface area that the wind is acting on like smaller by about a third. So get rid of the dew shield, and also try to fix the cables as much as possible so they're not like flailing in the wind freely. Using these tips, as long as the conditions are not extreme, you can still image. If you're out with your car or in a place where there are buildings or walls or anything like that, use them as wind blockers. If I have my telescope this low and I place it next to my car in a way that I'm blocking the main direction of the wind, I can image quite well, maybe not at the longest focal lengths because usually those tubes are longer, but I can still have a decent night of imaging. And this has happened to me many times because the places where I go to image in the mountains often have wind. The next one, make use of your car's 12-volt battery. I have this battery with me that I use for shooting sometimes, and this can charge via the DC port directly via the 12-volt output of my car. So what I do is I plug it in when I start back home from my dark sky site. It is charging about halfway until I get home, and then while I drive back out again, by the time I'm out, it charges all the way. I also have a larger battery that unfortunately is not able to charge via 12 volts, so I still have to take this upstairs in my house to charge. But if you don't need something so huge, you might want to look into a model that you can charge directly from your car. Charging everything in your car also goes for other things, like maybe your camera battery that you can plug in. I have my red light lamp that I keep in my car at all times, and when it's not on my head, it's just plugged into the USB. One thing to keep in mind with the batteries: if you drive a regular internal combustion engine gas vehicle, maybe just don't leave them connected to the 12-volt battery while you're not driving, because getting stuck out there and your car not starting may not be a fun time. I have this whole bag of goodies here that pretty much never leaves my car, and it includes things like my winter coat, some warm sweaters and hats and scarves and everything like that. And I also have my winter boots in my car. And that is because I pretty much don't need these clothes until like December or January, apart from the times when I go out at night into the mountains. And also because this way I can always make sure that I have them, while I realize that not everyone can leave all their equipment in their car all the time. But you can still have like a goodie bag of things that you just keep in your garage next to your equipment. So you don't have to think about that. You don't have to write lists. You don't have to check. It's just something that comes automatic. You grab the bag, you have everything with you when you need it. I actually keep all of my tripods in the car at all times because realistically, I don't need them anywhere else. So not only do I have my telescope tripods that I showed you before, I also have my half beard that I can put on any of them. And I even have somewhere underneath here some small old phone tripods that I can use if I just want to take a quick shot of my equipment. And I even have a star tracker in here if I decide to take some wide angle shots. All right, here's my last and likely most important tip, and that is if, like me, on these nights spent outside, you spend some time sleeping in your car, then it is crucial that you have a decent solution to sleep. I have installed a simple mattress in my car to ensure that I get decent sleep on these nights. Now, this is my setup, this simple mattress that has the exact shape that fits into my car, and once all my gear is set up, I can get a good night's sleep and ensure that I wake up energized the following morning. Now, I have also added some extras to make it even more comfortable. They might look like I'm a little bit extra, but they make all the difference. The first one of these is this USB humidifier. Now, it might seem like a little bit of an unnecessary luxury, but at first I didn't have it. And as I usually have the air conditioning on all night to heat the car, I end up very dehydrated because it just gets really dry in there. So I just have this tiny thing in there, which you just put into any container of water, and it keeps humidifying the car. It has a battery, but it is charged over USB-C. So for the most part, I just leave it plugged in overnight, and it is much more refreshing to sleep like this. Now, I also have some privacy options for these nights spent in the car. Like, I have a whole set of these shades that I can install all over the car. Magnetically, and not only do they protect me from the lights and from obviously people looking inside in the winter, they also help with the insulation. This is really not a must-have investment. You can easily just have one of those blackout masks if you're not in a place where you're worried about people looking inside. Of course, no matter what option you choose for privacy, for your safety, it is an absolute must that you lock the car from the inside as soon as you go to sleep. And that's pretty much it. That's all my tips for making your dark sky trips less painful, as efficient as possible, and hopefully you have found some time-saving tips in this list that you can also apply. That said, I would love to hear from all of you if you have further ideas or different tips which can help us improve this process even further. Please leave them below in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked this, then consider subscribing to the Space Koala channel for everything related to telescopes and astrophotography. And clear skies, everyone. Good night.